So I moved from New Zealand to Germany 3 years ago. I was working at a hotel in Munich as a bar manager while I had been learning the language. It's ridiculously complicated, especially if English is your first language. Anyway, I am a 27-year-old, blonde, thin, punky looking, well, you get the picture, kind of girl. It was a 2-minute walk from my hotel to the train station, and I had to catch the train to my hometown after I finished work most nights. It was common for me to get harassed at the train station or on the way to the station, even though it was only a 2-minute walk. It was extra horrible because I couldn't speak German very well. I once had a guy ask to marry me for money, another one asking me why I don't speak his language because he wanted me to come home with him. Another one called me a slut because I ignored him, and the list goes on. But the scariest time was actually in my hometown. I live 35 kilometers away from the city. I head home on the train as usual. I got off the train and began walking around the corner to my apartment. This is at midnight on a Monday. I get to my apartment and unlock the door. But as I am unlocking my door, someone taps me on the shoulder. I turn around and see a man behind me, quite short, Middle Eastern, a friendly enough looking guy. I was obviously shocked by this, so my immediate response assumed he lived in the building. So I asked if I could help him with something. He said in German, "I need your number." Again, I was shocked because I assumed he lived in the building and was locked out of his house or something. I was so naive. He began to tell me that he had followed me home from Munich and needed my number. I said no, and that I was married and that my husband was literally inside the apartment. He followed with, "That doesn't matter," and asked if he could come in. I began to freak out and started really losing it before I stated that I was going inside and bid him farewell. As I entered my apartment, he pushed me forward and tried to get inside. I turned around and slammed the door so hard in his face it brought tears to my eyes. Not the slamming, but you know what I mean. The creep continued to stand outside for a few minutes. I could see him through the peephole. By the time I told my husband, he was gone. I didn't even think of calling the police. I was too bewildered. The thing that scares me is that this situation could have been so much worse. I am quite fit and strong, but if I were someone smaller, it could have been really bad. I keep thinking of all the things that could have happened, and it still gives me nightmares. If I didn't shut the door in time, if I lived alone, all these things go through my brain. Now I carry pepper spray and a whistle everywhere I go. So the creepy man who followed me 35 kilometers home and tried to get into my house, let's never meet again. Please. Okay, so into this story or ongoing story. As far as I'm concerned, the cameraman, a name I made up as a child, has been around my entire life. I've never seen his actual face or anything distinctive because he always hides when I see his camera flash. Though, to be honest, after a while, I just stopped looking for him. He has followed me throughout my whole life and has many photos of me from when I was a child to now. The last time I saw his flash was last night. The only way I know he has taken a photo of me is the camera flash, hence the name. As a child, I made up a story about him. His entire house is a red room as he doesn't trust modern cameras and Photoshop. His entire house is filled with photos of me and my family, all following my journey from infant to the 17-year-old teenager I currently am. However, I do not know if this is true. I know it sounds like I'm trying to get some creepy story and internet points, but I promise you, this is not the case. This is real, or at least real to me. I have told my therapist about it. I see a therapist for unrelated issues, and she told me I was hallucinating. However, she turned out to be a very unreliable therapist who only made my issues worse with false diagnosis and taking me off my anti-anxiety meds. But I digress. I'm sorry this is really short, as I don't know a lot about this man, and I have only seen his camera flash. I just need to know if others have encountered him, or is he specifically attracted to me, or if I'm just crazy. However, this just feels all too real, and I can't shake the uneasy feeling for days after I see his flash. Understandably, if you don't believe me, I completely get it, as it does sound fake, but I promise you, this is incredibly real to me. I just need someone to explain or understand me, as everyone I have told either use it to make fun of me or just brushed it off. It's hard feeling like you're the only one in a room with one door, knowing that something is on the other side of it that only seems to affect you. It's lonely. It's isolating. It's scary. I don't know what he wants or if this will ever stop, but I do know one thing. I need help. I need someone to believe me before it's too late. It would be sad to think people would believe my story after something terrible happened to me. But in a funny way, I'm reserved in thinking that if that were the case, maybe, just maybe, it would help to bring focus on the cameraman before it happened again. When I was a little girl, I lived in an apartment complex with my mother. The entire complex consists of two buildings that sat side by side less than 100 feet apart, with four two-bedroom flats, two upstairs and two down. We lived downhill, about 100 yards from a major 5-lane road, but you would never know due to the thick woods that bordered the complex on three sides. The last side was an area cut for power lines that ran next to our driveway with a graveyard directly behind it. It should go without saying that this setup was a recipe for many childish shenanigans as well as creepy encounters. On the front side of the complex and along the power line side were thick blackberry brambles. They weren't quite as thick along the power line area, but in the front of the apartment, you couldn't stick your arm in without being torn apart by the thorns, and it was so thick it was nearly impossible to push through. This is relevant later, trust me. Now, I was the only young child that lived there full time, and all the neighbors were, to the best of my knowledge, fond of me. I was active in the Girl Scouts, so when it was time, I would go around to all the neighbors for orders. Then, when they came in, I'd get my little wagon and deliver them. Because my mother knew and trusted all the neighbors, I would do this by myself. The day this happened, I had taken my wagon to the other building to deliver cookies to some of my mother's friends and was walking back. I hadn't meant to stay as long as I had, but they had an aquarium that I was fascinated with. That day, my mother's friend's husband had bought some new fish, so I had spent about 45 minutes helping them pick out names. So when I began to walk back, dusk had fallen. I had walked about 7 steps off their porch when I got a bad feeling. Now, I consider myself an empath and have learned to listen to my intuition carefully, but back then I just thought I had to poo. Bad. I stopped for a second to settle my stomach and heard a noise. When I looked to the front of the apartments where the blackberries were the most thick, initially I couldn't see anything. I want to say he flicked a lighter, almost like he was trying to purposely alert me to his presence. The second I saw him, though, I froze. He had shoulder length, stringy black hair, bad skin, and he was so skinny he looked like a skeleton. Knowing what I know now, I imagine he was probably strung out. I realized when he knew I saw him because his face split into a wicked, not at all friendly grin. Then he began tearing his way through the blackberry brambles towards me. I began running towards my house while screaming bloody murder as I heard his feet slap the pavement behind me. I got to my steps and my Uncle Mike, who lived next door, flung his door open to see what the hell was going on. But the man had disappeared. I began screaming and crying about the man that had chased me out of the woods. Because Mike hadn't seen him, initially he thought I let my imagination run away with me, but when they looked at the area I said he emerged from, there was a clear path and blood from where he'd been cut by the thorns. After they took their machetes to cut away the brambles and investigate where he came from, they discovered a small area he'd been standing in with a small pile of cigarette butts, like he was waiting for me when he saw me walk across initially. A few weeks later, deeper in the woods, my mother's boyfriend and I discovered a small tent with assorted paraphernalia and very disturbing porn. No one mentioned the connection, but I was very mature for my age. So when I thought about it, it disturbed me very much. So disturbing a stranger that departed your fuck tent to watch me from the woods, let's not meet again.